Long Gone John is a gentleman and a scholar, in the truest sense of the word.
John is quite a striking person to meet.
He's like an art pirate, you know.
I wouldn't describe him as an art pirate.
I would watch him save pennies every dime he made just to buy a piece of art.
You know, if he sees something he wants, he will not take no for an answer.
You can see how much he loves the things that he collects.
The things he likes, the things he collects, you know, it all kind of goes together to make that unique thing, you know, which is kind of larger than life.
He is extremely giving, and I don't know, he's fun. He's a fun guy.
Oh, yeah. Come on, baby. Tell baby Robin, call Murray the man. We're gonna grab that can and bring it on. Yeah. Call Queen Lucy, the roll of bone show. We're gonna toss that hoe and bring it on.
Everyone that lives in America has an obsessive compulsive desire to buy things all the time, because that's what kind of culture we live in. People define themselves by what they own and by what they buy.
Some collectors collect for themselves. Some collectors collect to make money. And some collectors collect to impress other people.
John's definitely the best kind of collector, because he's the kind of guy that it doesn't matter how much something costs. If he loves it, that's it. He's going to have it, you know?
Swami back here live and direct, joined with a very special guest, Mr. Long Gone John of Sympathy for the Record Industry. Where did that collector spirit, where did it come from?
I think it results from not really having much as a kid, and I'm really trying to make up for that somehow. When I was a little kid, I was pretty much banned from the house. I lived outside because I was always in some trouble for something at school. I really took to the alley. And digging in people's trash and finding things. And that was really the beginning of this, probably this obsession of collecting stuff. I sort of liked that little life of you know, discovering things in people's garbage, you know, and dragging them home. That was the beginning. And at some point it graduated to going to thrift stores and to swap meets. And, you know, eventually one day I was frequenting galleries, and I always wanted to show something for my money because of that ethic I have, what I have today. Too much stuff. And I go out every weekend looking for more because that's what I do. You know, I like things. One more little thing, you know. One more big thing. One more anything. Todd is doing this commission piece.
John had, you know, expressed interest in a large painting.
It was kind of Todd's idea. At 6 foot by 8 foot, it's the biggest painting that he has done.
I mean, a lot of my paintings are about collecting iconic images and turning them into other things. And, you know, I mean, it's like my own obsessions with collecting and stuff.
The time I became aware of Todd, I was driving down Melrose, saw this painting in their front window.
And saying it was dark, but there was sort of this painting looming in the darkness that he saw and pulled over and couldn't get out of his mind.
I just thought, you know, I'm going to go buy that painting, and as it turns out, I did.
I mean, I used to draw all the time like a lot of kids. And my parents expressed an interest in it and thought, oh, this kid's got talent. You know, just as any parent would. You know, they think, oh, my kid's talented. So for whatever reason, they did put me into art classes early. You know, my parents' generation, it was like, well, you don't want to be one of these starving artists. You know, so any kind of fine artist, you know, is like, well, you're going to be just starving, and you're going to be a drug addict, and you're going to blah, blah.
Skill, just pure skill, involved in one of Todd's paintings is unbelievable. His craft is so very high.
So it's basically, I come up with the concept, and in John's case, because he was, you know, has this pirate image, I thought, well, pirates kind of treasure, you know, and John's sense is all of his, you know, knickknacks and collectibles and stuff. I thought it might be fun to actually include him in the painting. Well, the underpainting gives me an idea of how the entire piece looks at that point, and I can see my lights and darks, and it acts as like a guide, and also I'm not working against just blank white canvas. It'd be kind of an interesting scenario to have, you know, pirate galleon in a harbor, and then have the thing being unloaded, and a progression kind of leads throughout the painting, and then eventually winds up in a secret, you know, treasure cave or whatever.
There's a lot of bits and pieces in here that are, you know, parts of things that I collect or things that I treasure.
Well, it takes 3 shining
I mean, I was fanatical for years about records. It wasn't even about music anymore. It was about artifacts, you know, and having to have every version, you know. I wanted all the records, all the fanzines, all the paraphernalia, all the everything.
We used to call him John Toilet. You know, back then, his name was Johnny Toilet.
He used to be named Johnny Toilet, so I'd always heard he was Johnny Toilet.
Records, you know, consumed my life. I was completely, you know, engulfed in the whole punk culture. You know, the ideology, the music, the imagery, the people, you know, everything that went along with it.
So when the punk rock thing come, as nihilist as it was really fresh air.
Punk rock was always, it was questioning, you know, it always questioned, no matter what it was questioning something.
There was a ton of weird underground music coming out that was real inspiring.
Punk was just a way that I could be as emotional as I wanted to be, you know? I mean, standing in the middle of a room full of people screaming your head off about how angry you were and like smashing into people and just running around in circles.
People just sort of did what they wanted, and have bands around like the Screamers who didn't have guitars at all, or bands like Devo that, you know, had weird props and characters.
And I did go to all those shows, the early shows at the Mask, and everything that went on every weekend, I was there.
He just decided to change his moniker, and he made business cards that said Long Gone John, freelance brain surgeon, and started handing those out.
I eventually began writing about the bands that I enjoyed. The first thing in my life that I was that passionate about. I just bought everything there was, and probably today have one of the most complete collections, you know, of anybody that I know. So all of a sudden I got into this mode where I wanted to be responsible for creating some of these artifacts myself. And being this completely anal, fanatical record collector, the next step was fucking making my own record.
I mean, he was a record pirate. He puts out pirated music. You know, the true modern pirate.
I think I was really one of the first to start a bootleg 7-inch label.
I see where it could piss people off, but I don't think it hurt them. If anything, it probably helps with some of them in a way, and they don't really realize it, you know?
I think it's kind of cool that they exist, and they're only for fans anyway. I don't think they cut into anyone's sales.
A lot of bands knew exactly what I was doing. You know, I'm not going to say everything I ever did was sanctioned, but a lot of it actually was.
So Johnny took the rap on some stuff that he didn't even really do because he was a little known for doing some stuff, so a lot of the heat would get piled on him, even though he wasn't always responsible, you know?
He will do it. If there's money to be made, something to put out, whatever, he will do it first and then figure it out later.
It wasn't just about, you know, turning a profit, you know, it was about being really proud of what I was doing, whether I had a right to do it or not. I worked for 10 years as a teamster, working in a warehouse, hating every single day, and I'd probably still be there, but I eventually got fired for getting in a fight. And I did sue them, did settle out of court, and with that money, I did pretty much start the record label.
And then the first record that you did
was the
Lazy Cowgirls.
And they were in the process of doing a record. I kept asking what was going on with it, and it just seemed it was caught up in limbo. And eventually I agreed to step in and put it out myself, and that was the beginning of the label, 1988. I just came up with the name Sympathy for the Record Industry, and that was it, you know. I was on my way.
Rock pop, we got hardcore, we got way more, we got.
I did a lot of records really, really fast. Sometimes I'd have, you know, 4 or 5 releases every single month.
It would just be whatever, you know, half-ass band of the moment was putting out records. You know, but John had really good taste, and he would kind of pick out the right bands, you know, bands you hadn't necessarily heard of.
Nobody really has put out the number of records that I've done. I have 750 records in the catalog.
He was putting out probably at least 1 record a week, maybe even 2 a week.
You know, he did hundreds and hundreds of these little sub-quality rock and roll bands, and mixed in there were people that were important.
I'm the only guy, you know, there isn't another person, so it is my vision 100%.
And he was actually putting the records in the sleeves. He was putting them into envelopes to mail. He was fucking doing it all.
And I did that all by myself, always.
The indie labels were good at sort of convincing you that they were different than the majors, that they weren't like that, you know, and basically all that meant was that they were broke, but they wanted to be the majors.
Destroying eardrums for over 2 decades. Spanning the globe. Tassie Bushweed. Airboy. Frosty August.
I hate the music industry. It sucks. You know, it's full of shit.
Well, yeah, I look at the rock and roll industry as basically being a 2-lane blacktop highway, and John's the only one who stops to pick up the gnarly hitchhikers. He'll take them to their destination, or he'll fucking kick them out of the car.
John's setup was always kind of different. He was an actual kind of working class guy who started a little indie label and didn't insist on owning your masters, didn't even think about it, and just sort of, you know, was like, look, I'll put out this record. You make the music, I'll put out the record, I'll make it look cool, and then we'll see what happens with it.
Why do you call yourself the anti-mogul?
I thought it was fitting somehow. I kind of do everything wrong somehow. I didn't want to be part of what everybody else was doing. I didn't want to just always be completely unique or anything either, but I just didn't want to be the same. I'd never signed bands. I don't have contracts. I've never asked a band for any publishing.
You don't sign anything. It's a handshake deal. You agree to do something with the band and split profit on the back end with them, and it's all pretty open-ended, where if the artist is unhappy, they can go whenever they want.
I'll be fine as long as I shut this mouth of mine.
Let's talk about the White Stripes, because that's a band that everybody knows, and you put out their first 3 records. How did that happen?
There's not a major label A&R guy in the world who would have signed the White Stripes, period.
I don't think they would have put the White Stripes out if he hadn't first. They would have said to 2 people in the band, and she can't drum, and you know.
They made 3 records with him, so that really gave them a chance to build up a career, to get out on the road, to play, to have something to support, to have some good records, and a record deal kind of flowed from that.
Good fortune smiled on them. I'm not saying they're not talented. They're talented, but they're not more talented than anybody else. There's no real logic why one band makes it and the other one doesn't.
Again, I knew I lost you then. I knew I lost you then. And heaven knows when I'll get my voice. The White Stripes, they probably didn't think they could make enough money to live on being on Sympathy, so they had to go to the next level or something.
That, you know, they've gotten so popular, they were selling tons of records. It gets to a point where something like that happens, one guy in his house can't handle it all.
I gave her my best song, Schmendrick. I didn't see a dime.
He was sort of one of the first to get girl bands in there, too. He had, like, Hole, Courtney Love, and the Muffs.
He likes girl groups. He likes girl singers and girl-centric bands, I think.
The new band that I'm in now, and he gave us some money to do a CD, and actually don't use that, because I don't know if he gives other bands money, so.
I really enjoyed creating the packages. That was a big part of it for me.
He likes nice packaging, so that's when he got really involved, and he came up with this. What a perv. Well, that's my ass. I showed him these pink ruffled panties, and he just really liked it.
Matter of fact, I went to the pressing plants and I mixed my own vinyl, which they had never let anybody do before.
And there's a reason why concern is cut down beside. There are no eyelids on the crocodile. He can close his eyes. There is a moral.
So I put everything that attracted me as a record buyer into producing, you know, these artifacts. And that's what I think of them as. I think of them as artifacts, you know.
Then we collaborated on projects together under the name Flies Amongst the Maggots.
These flies that I've used for years and years and years as kind of a logo of sorts.
One of which was a picture disc. Well, it wasn't actually a picture disc, it was an etched disc. And the only things on it were my etchings, really. So you couldn't play it. Well, you could, but you wouldn't hear anything. But you would. You'd hear your record player being ripped apart.
I essentially wrote a story called The Little Record That Wished It Could. And my friend Edwin, Savage Pencil in England, we decided to have him illustrate this story.
An idea of selling an artwork in a record shape.
That takes place on 2 7-inch picture discs. The story is about a little boy who goes into a record store, buys a record in a cheap bin, takes it home, and puts it on, and nothing's there. You know, he thinks, oh, fuck this, and he throws it across the room, and the next day he's like, oh, wait a minute, you know, he doesn't want to have been taken, you know, and he just can't figure out how could there not be any music, so he goes back and he puts on the record again, and somewhere in his mind he starts, you know, imagining this music. And each time that he plays it, it gets more intense and more intense until he finally goes crazy. These picture discs, they have no music on them because I didn't want music on them. It was a book. To me, it was a book that took place on 2 7-inch records. So it had no music on them. But just to be funny, I mastered these records. I created different lengths of nothingness on these records.
No music on it. But kind of a joke on making records. You know, just making a record with nothing on it is a pretty great idea, I think.
There's nothing there. Turn it up. Nothing but surface noise. So that's it. That's four sides of nothingness.
Well, you know, you have to understand, right around 1990, you know, doing something for sympathy was like the shit.
Back when I was a commercial artist, that was something to aspire to. You know, I always thought it'd be cool if I could do a sympathy record cover.
When I started doing the covers for him, that was probably the first thing that most people saw of my work. That's responsible for, I think, a lot of my subsequent success is the exposure of that artwork.
You do an album cover and, you know, it'll be all over the planet.
I've seen a lot of artists come into LA and no one knew who they were. And Johnny, you know, put them to work doing record covers or whatever. Pretty soon these artists became somewhat popular, you know. So Johnny's done a lot for artists. A lot of artists, you hear him complain about, oh, that guy didn't pay me enough back in the day, blah, blah. Well, guess what? You did it, you know.
You know, I did all of that stuff for slave wages, and John kept all the original art, of course, so.
We told him, you know, just let us do our thing. And he didn't meddle, he didn't say anything, he just said, make me a cool album cover, and that's the best kind of situation for us.
Just what John has done with his business is such an amazing thing that, you know, single-handedly he's created this business, and I think that is a very American kind of a thing. I mean, that's sort of what you're supposed to be able to do.
That may be at the point in time where I became interested in art, you know, and realizing that I actually could buy a painting. I walked into the gallery and saw Mark's paintings for the first time and just was completely knocked out.
Mark's work definitely stood out in that particular exhibition.
I ended up buying one. It was the first painting that he sold in the first show that he ever had.
You know, when we were children, that's when our visual vocabulary came together. That's when we formed all our archetypes in our head of what the world is about. And those children's books that we looked at as kids really formed our vision of the world. And so I think that's why I kind of come back to that.
I asked Mary Karnowski if she would please give me Mark's number.
I think John mentioned wanting to talk to him either about a project, a commission painting.
She gave me his number, and I contacted Mark. We became friends, you know, we became friends very quickly.
And from it came some really great collaborative projects, some really great paintings.
I had this idea to do a takeoff on Satanic Majesty's Request. And I had the name Sympathetic Majesty's Request in my mind for years. I wanted to be in it. Number one, Mark didn't really want to do real specific people other than myself. So he took the Brian Jones figure but put a big bunny head. He put Christ, he put the devil. Oh, and the girl became a keen girl. I gave him very specific things to include. It has a lot of very, very personal things in there. And there's an image of my mother on a big cootie bug, you know. And, you know, the cats, he's done like 13 cats in the painting. You know, one of the most dense paintings that Mark has done.
It's just a classic painting motif to have this, reclining nude. It's a very slow, time-consuming process, and it's like meditating. The initial conceptual part of it is a little different, but then once you start executing, there's just hundreds of hours of just sitting and painting, and you can just kind of zone out and go off into work for hours and hours, days and days.
Cecilia is the patron saint of musicians.
You just have to say anytime you do.
I saw this when it was maybe, a quarter of the way completed. And I just said, I want it, I want it.
This painting I had in the works for a while. A lot of people think that's Christina Ricci because I have used her in several paintings, and it's not. It just kind of looks like her. The Snow White painting that John bought has a bunny, and that was a major element in the painting. It took me a really long time to figure out what that was, and it went through a lot of different variations. It's a big part of my creative process is finding really inspirational objects. And I had several different versions of this with different characters over there in the drawing stages, and then even once I started painting it, I had painted in, totally finished off a few different characters, but nothing seemed quite right. And there was one day at the swap meet right here in Pasadena, I was just walking along and I saw that bunny just there on the ground with a bunch of stuff, and it was like a ray of light shone down, and I just knew that's what had to be there.
Any way you like it, any way you choose.
My favorite thing in the world is this painting that I own.
You just have to say.
I just remember the first time I met John, I think it was at my mother's house. I was about 18 years old. John was probably about 16. And he was a friend of my brother's. I think they had just escaped from a boys' home together.
I'd open the door, and there were like 50 umbrellas hanging from the ceiling, extended.
That was John's beginning.
Yes, that was his beginning. And so my friends would say, well, what do you have these umbrellas? And I was like, yeah, my dad's a little crazy, and we'd go in and watch Popeye, and then I would try to get them out before they noticed the baby coffin with the clown in it, but,
he didn't have much growing up, so collecting masses of things as an adult, it was really important to him.
I was born in Whittier, California, It's so much shittier in Whittier. So that's it. This is the house I lived at until I went off to boarding school. Very, very Catholic family. Went on to have 4 brothers and 4 sisters. I was always the black sheep, always the bad apple. Thus went my life. I never had anything in common with anybody. You know, then I didn't, and today I don't.
How long must I wait?
My relationship with my mother was brutal. We just were mortal enemies. The story is that my mother had a nervous breakdown when I was born. For whatever reason, never forgave me, you know, or blamed me for that. So we had a very uneasy relationship that continued to get worse and worse as I got older. I think my father tried to compensate somewhat, but we never had a good relationship either. It was better, but not ideal. It was like each day my father would come home from work and we'd all sit at the table, and my place was to sit right next to him. So as my mother unveiled all my dastardly deeds for the day, he wouldn't have to get up to hit me. I'd be right there within swinging range, so he could smack me without actually having to get up while he was eating. I went to Catholic school. To this day, I really believe that had I not went to Catholic school, I probably would not know how to read or write. I was not happy at home. They were not happy having me there. And I eventually, you know, at 7th grade, halfway through 7th grade, I was taken out of school and sent to boarding school. I had a much better life away from home, you know, a little more freedom, and so it actually worked out pretty good for me. So here is my glorious 1965 St. John Bosco Brave yearbook. And there's a little story behind this because I didn't actually have a yearbook. Understanding how important these things were, I stole one. And I was smart enough to steal one from someone named John. And so all these inscriptions in here are to someone named John, who I have no idea who that was anymore. After 8th grade, they told my parents that I was not welcome to return. So at that point, I went back home and started a succession of about 5 high schools. Never graduated from high school. I went to Cantwell in Montebello, which is an all-boy Catholic school. I think I lasted there a month or so. Then I went to Pioneer High School in Whittier. Lasted there a month or so. Went to Whittier High School. Well, basically I didn't go to school. And if I was at school, I was ultimately getting into some kind of trouble. I was good at robbing houses. I kind of found that very adventurous, and I enjoyed it. And it wasn't really that I usually stole things, but I did. But I'd like to look in the refrigerators, you know, and see if there was anything in there that I wanted. And one time I usually would do this by myself, but one time I had done it with another kid, and we did steal some stuff. And they called the police. You know, came and picked me up and took me to jail. They were going to, you know, send me home. And I said I didn't want to go home. I said, send me to juvenile hall. I was a ward of the court until I was 18 years old. The rest of the time was juvenile hall, boarding school, boys' homes, which again was a pretty good life for me. The first boys' home I was ever in was on Venice Beach. I look back on that as one of my favorite times in my life. You know, I was on the beach, I had a very relaxed situation in the home. We were allowed to smoke. They thought there was something therapeutic about it for kids. Every kid in the house smoked. The therapist every week would come in. He'd like walk to the middle of the floor and dump out these big brown bags filled with cartons of cigarettes and candy. And everybody'd make like a big jump for it and grab their fucking cartons of cigarettes for the week. At the time, each of the kids was being given $25 for their birthday. I bought my first 5 albums I ever owned. They were much more important artifacts than just records. You know, they were very important things to me. I was 17. I was living in the last boys' home I would be in Echo Park. And I had a girlfriend at the time. Her mother bought us tickets to see the Rolling Stones at the Long Beach Arena. So I saw them for the first time, just completely transfixed. At 17, I got a place to live. I'd never pay my rent. I'd take my money and go down and buy, you know, cool shoes. And I had this extreme shoe fetish at the time, and I spent all my money on shoes. My big thing that I did was I had a route. Every single night I'd go out and rob all the Goodwill booths. Every weekend I would go to the swap meets and sell the stuff. I really feel that I live in the second-hand world. Not only is the merchandise better, used and older, but I like, you know, I think I like the people. Mr. Schneider, come on in. How do you do?
Yeah, good to see you. Thank you for having me.
The first time we went to his house, it's like visiting a monument meets like the Addams Family.
He's just got this museum going. He should just start having tours.
What's your favorite image? And
there's one with Margaret Keane, which is somebody I really, really love. It's from her museum show, which I published the book for the show. If I had to say about a favorite image up there, it's that painting by Marion Peck, because it's just the best thing. I collect people's prescription bottles, artists and
really?
Some famous people. Prozac.
Can I read this out loud?
Yeah, right.
Debbie Harry Prozac. Oops, I even see a Mark Ryden in there.
Those syringes are obviously for
a horse
animals, but they look so brilliant.
They're giant ceramic eggs from the late 50s.
The first one I ever saw, I bought from you.
Oh, yeah.
I was over at his house one day, and he says, "Oh, I gotta show you this new. I got this new thing." So he opens up he's got his closet, and he opens up this closet, and he pulls out this coat, and it's this old ratty like leather coat, and it's got like leopard down the sleeves, and it's got this embroidered like a leopard head on the back of it. And I realized it's the fucking jacket that Iggy Pop is wearing on the back cover of Raw Power. And it's just like, oh my God, that should be in the Smithsonian or something.
In his office, he has this what looks like a mummy baby. And I said, well, where'd you get that? And he goes, I don't really like to talk about where I got it. Later, I find out the thing's just a piece of art that's been made out of paper mache.
You know, I tell everybody it's real, then I tell them it's not real, but it's real.
He has Ed Wood's personal script for Plan 9 with the handwritten details.
My inner child is called Shambles.
Shambles.
Up here is a painting of Sona Hans. That is a pretty familiar piece of Robert's called Snuffing. This was one of the jackets that they wore when they lived out in Death Valley. And
Really?
They all had them.
No.
And this is when Charlie was looking for Devil's Hole, the cat's bathroom, but I actually have some pretty cool artwork in here. There's an original Andy Warhol. Sid Vicious's record for Nevermind the Bullet. I had this idea to do all the Warhol cans. I had him paint a Cream of Sympathy.
Would you please give a huge welcome to Candy Pants?
You started a toy company, Necessaries?
That's called Necessaries Toy Foundation.
Necessary.
But you were close.
He's a fan of the medium. And so, if you can, what better than to make the toys that you actually want to own?
The natural progression was from being this fanatical, over-the-top collector to being essentially, I guess, a designer, a producer. You know, I did the Enid figure from Ghost
World. The first one
World.
that you did was the Enid figure from Ghost World.
Right, yeah, and I just thought that really needed to exist. I mean, I couldn't believe a movie that was that incredible, you know, that meant so much to me, that there wasn't a figure out there. So Enid was the first figure.
Originally when I sculpted Enid, Enid's skirt was a solid piece of plastic, and her legs just stuck a little bit underneath here. And then John calls and says, hey, you know, we should be able to look under her skirt. And it was already done. So that's the Enid panty shot.
Artist toys seem to be just exploding. They're getting bigger and bigger.
I don't know, it just maybe has something to do with childhood.
It can be whatever you want it to be. If you want it to be a toy, it's a toy. If you want to put it in a nice glass case and spotlight it, it's art.
I think toys are kind of an introduction to the work of certain artists. And so it's kind of like, you know, a gateway drug. You know, it's like, it's the marijuana of the art world, you know?
People are becoming involved in art through these avenues that they never had open to them before.
You can basically get something that is a really nice piece of art, sculptural art, for $50.
Art for the masses. Things that are affordable, that people can collect and start getting into art at a lower echelon.
Yeah, these are some of my toys.
Kind of like limited edition art sculptures.
Kid Robot toys, Metacom toys, Ningushi toys.
Something like this is my first plush character.
Bounty Hunter, Bunny Hunter, the rare Fiery Jack.
I think like you got right here, there's the prototype.
Most of the Fowler stuff.
The items that when I create them, they sell out.
Some rare Japanese boutique stuff.
Originally it went for $50.
More Metacom stuff.
Now on eBay, you can find them. They've gone as high as $700.
So these are all the little bunnies to date. You know, initial idea for a mecha version of the Dunny. It looks cool, let's do it. Then I come over here.
At some point, it becomes overkill. Like when everybody can make a toy.
The second one I did was Antoinette, which is the sympathy girl, a modern version of, you know, Keen. Seeing something turn into a three-dimensional thing from a painting is just so gratifying. Then after that, a Todd Shore piece. It's like this character that's appeared in lots of his paintings, this two-headed bunny duck creature.
People need to be able to have, you know, art in their lives, whether it's in the form of a toy, whether it's in the form of a $50,000 painting.
Who doesn't like a toy? Everybody had a toy.
They're certainly not to be played with, and that's the funniest thing, is going over to somebody's house who's got all this crap. I've got a lot of friends who won't let their kids touch their toys, and it's really weird.
Toys are not playthings for me. I don't sit around and play with toys. These are prototypes for Camille Rose Garcia.
Well, she's almost human when she steps up to you and she gives you a kiss from the lips that never miss. And she's almost, yeah, she's almost human. When I picked up on the phone, baby, and I pressed it to my ear, I hear your voice coming through the line, baby, loud and clear. You tell me, come on over, that you want to see my pretty face. But I don't want to see yours, baby, no, it's a mistake. 'Cause she's almost human when she steps up to you and she gives you a kiss from the lips that never miss. And she's almost, yeah, but she's almost human. Oh, but I come to my car, baby, and I drove it to your house. I tried to find you, baby, but I had to find the crowd. Surrounded by so many people you don't even know. Now you don't know what to do, babe. Now you don't know where to go. And she's almost human when she
try to go into like, I guess, sort of a 5-year-old state where it's like, I'm gonna play and I'm gonna, you know, have fun. And, you know, to me, that's what great art is, or art or music or books, is something that really, you know, challenges the dominant regime, the structure, the oppressor, everything.
It's not really for me to say, but I think, you know, she's, you know, a little bit politically motivated. You know, she's got some real sensibilities and concerns about the planet.
Leave me on the moon. I must be coming back too soon. Pieces of pieces lay in a pile. Somebody's walking on my hands.
A lot of her little mutant creatures are like mutants because people are putting, you know, bad chemicals in the water, you know, and fucking up the landscape.
Everything's good as long as it stays still. Coins jingle in my brain, and you've been watching me through your jewelry, sending rings around my head. Now that
All the paintings are kind of like some kind of parallel universe, or actually probably very close to reality, you know. It's just everyone's antidepressants.
meet me on the moon, and you can stay there too.
I think it's so nice to have a female artist be able to influence many different realms.
I start with writings, you know, like what the show's going to be about. Then usually I'll try to do some drawings of the characters, what kind of characters I'm going to use. A lot of times I'll do a whole painting and then I'll decide that that's not what I wanted to do, and I'll kind of paint it out, but maybe leave a little bit of it and then start another painting. So some of the paintings have like 2 or 3 paintings underneath them, you know. If anything gets too precious or perfect, I need to mess it up instantly because I hate perfection. I hate my own perfection. I hate how well I can draw.
It seems apparent that she's going to be a very important artist, I think.
I just started eating yesterday. Come here. Oh, yeah. Come here, little fat kitty.
I can't imagine what life would be like without cats. And my dad has said that he doesn't trust anyone who doesn't like cats. Growing up, we would adopt any cat that needed a home, it seemed. I had a feeling we were a little different than everyone else. I remember a family dinner out, and we ordered our food, and then no one came to check on us, or our food never arrived. And I asked my parents if we were like the Munsters.
I follow her, I will.
They wouldn't wait on us, and Taggy started crying. She goes, "We're the Munster family, aren't we?"
Yeah, I'll dress in black.
Well, my dad didn't look like other dads exactly, and, people would stare, mostly at him.
John was a good dad, and he was always there, and he just always went out and worked and came home, and he paid the bills.
And I remember walking into the room, and my dad was just like crying, literally just crying, because for one moment he just didn't know where he was going to go with his life, what was going to happen. And I'm sure his concern was just his family. And I remember just like, you know, to see anyone's dad cry like that, it's just like,
Well, I hate to hear that lonesome church bell ring.
My mother worked nights and weekends, so I ended up spending a lot of time with my dad, following him around. You know, my weekends were spent at the tattoo shop all day long, or the record stores, you know, wake up early, go to the swap meet. Collecting comforts him, and I think that's his greatest joy, is being surrounded by all these things that he's found. And
I'm getting ready to move to Washington State. And Jeannie will stay here. She lives in the house next door.
He lives there, I live here. He's a very busy guy, and I let him just do his thing because he's just, his whole life is just what he does, and he really doesn't have time for a lot of other things. So that's all I have to say about that.
You know, even though me and Jeannie aren't together anymore, we'll still always be very, very close. You know, I really care about her. I always will.
Well, I think John has a really good heart, and I think he means no harm to anybody in the whole world, but I think he was a little bit different, and nobody really ever understood that.
why does he do it? I don't know. He just has that insight. He knows what it takes, and he does it. He likes what he likes. He's not doing it to impress anyone. He never was like afraid of what other people thought. He just went for what he thought was cool.
The beginning of collecting art for me was Robert Williams. The painting is here in the cat's bathroom. So actually this may be a bit of a trick to get down. Fucking A, this thing weighs a ton.
We might have enough room, you got it? Just enough room. Around the door.
Robert Williams, he's, the godfather of lowbrow art.
He certainly tapped into something really early on.
Pretty much he was like the midwife of the whole deal.
Most people would agree that Robert Williams opened the door for all of us.
He's like a grandfatherly figure to some of these kids.
No one else was doing stuff like that, or that I was being exposed to.
Like, he's the only dude that like went from the youth culture of the 60s and revalidated himself as a seminal driving force for the youth culture of the 80s, 90s, and now the 2000s.
You know, the first time I saw the Zombie Mystery Paintings book, it sort of clicked to me that I could do this more sort of representational art, you know, that involved elements of kind of pop culture and sort of low culture.
He was showing in real galleries, and I think that made a lot of artists think, wow, I could do that too.
I see his most popular manifestation is the revival of the Hot Rod Flame.
I think Williams was one of the first guys that like said, hey, the Emperor's wearing no clothes. You know, this is crap. You know, let's do something.
His paintings were, you know, the equivalent of the music that I liked in the art world, you know. Very fringe, nothing sacred.
I have always been in trouble with the law and the authorities. I've been kicked out of schools. I've always been on the dark side of things.
There's a real distinction about his work when you look at other artists who are working this way. His imagination just takes hold. He's, I think he's at a really exciting point, especially with the new work.
Is it okay for a girl to walk out in the light of day? I go walk down the street, she gets hit in the face by the first bad blues.
Because what he did is he took that tradition of 1940s through 1960s American everyman underground weirdo shit and turned it into art, and did it back then, and he was the only guy that suddenly popped up in the punk rock era and made a connection with like the new crowd.
Back in the alley, when the game gets fast, ain't no piece of paper gonna save your past. Yeah, we're just kids.
It's like he's been making art for almost 40 years now, and the technique level has just, I mean, he's a master.
I had always been a real color experimenter, and I could draw, you know, and I've always been interested in aberration and perversion and whatnot, so the subject matter come to me to just do real daring subject matter, and since I had a comic book background, I could tell a story.
We're a mob, we're a game. We'll bite your neck with a vampire fang. We're on the prowl, Wednesday to Tuesday, but you in half with a sword.
It's Robert's vision. He's the guy that put this thing together, and he still continues to be the driving force behind it.
It was originally supposed to be an outlaw underground publication. It was supposed to be hard-hitting and sharp-toothed.
We started out focusing on the low with sort of a fuck you to the high.
The first issue when that came out, I was like, nobody's seen anything like it before.
It was taking everything that I was trying to find and putting it all right in my lap.
Juxtapose was just, you know, the best thing that could have happened to this, you know, this whole movement, because it gave us all a forum.
You know, it's pretty anti-snob. It's very populist.
Robert Williams liked one of my paintings that was in that show called The Birth, and he put it on the cover of the second issue of Juxtapose, and that just sort of drove my career from commercial art towards the gallery world.
It's really about promoting the artist, and it's about putting people in touch with the artist, because it's features, it's not reviews. You're not reading what the writer thinks of the work, they're actually trying to convey the ideas that the artist is working with.
We're definitely trying to promote a real sense of community and a real sense of acceptance among the artists. To us, nothing is less invigorating than art criticism, you know? And the thing about art critics is that they're usually just frustrated artists who can't do it, you know? And they just, it's like music critics, you know? What's worse than a music critic? An art critic.
The fact that people don't really get it is really appealing, and I love that about the art world, is that, like, kids who read Juxtapose just don't get that weird conceptual stuff.
You know, you've got an enormous amount of critics that are failed artists, you know, and they're going to push their program, and they have their fish to fry. And personally, I've had some really brutal write-ups by art critics, you know, that people that virtually didn't know their ass from a hole in the ground, you know.
Does that bother you?
I don't think too many artists in Juxtapose have ever faced that.
I never did too well in school. No one could show me how. 'Cause I was always much too cool. Mama, look at me now. Just look at where I am today.
But I think it's created a weird competition, you know, going on. People struggling to get in that magazine because it's the only one out there.
Hey, if you have the art and it's cool and we like it, it ends up in the magazine.
Get it on!
John's always been a really hardcore supporter of the scene because he's one of the original guys. He's one of, you know, the most hardcore supporters that we've ever had.
LBC Ne'er-Do-Well, Long Gone John.
Long Beach City, Ne'er-Do-Well, Long Gone John, yeah. Ne'er-Do-Well, there you have it.
Yeah, is this in every issue?
Check alone in bags. I think you ought to know that I was just a dancer in a filthy bar. To the bully burned my coolie with his big cigar. Gave him up for screen test.
I can't actually imagine an issue of Juxtapose without a sympathy ad. Let's put it that way.
I think that now there's sort of a group, there's sort of a body of work, a body of artists that are sort of perceived of as being sort of juxtapose artists, you know. It ends up ghettoizing the work that's in there.
You know, watching tikis become so popular has just been pretty sickening. And you know, 15 years ago, I loved tikis.
Well, there's a lot of compromises in it. It's not the hard-hitting publication it used to be, but it's left my realm. I'm no longer the driving force in it anymore. When the underground petered out and another generation of artists came in, they had new directions, and that kind of set me on the side. My generation would have never stood for this war. See, my generation would have thrown a fucking shit fit over this war. See, but the young generation is kind of complacent and.
Every night is just Saturday night to me.
Now as I walk down life's lonely highway, I'll share a random thought. Just about my only consolation is that I never will get caught. Yes, it's a shame, the kind of pain that a man can inflict just that quick. Oh, but I wrote my lifetime story upon a brick.
Every night is just Saturday night. Every day is a beautiful day. Every night is just Saturday night to me.
Yeah, I once had a gal in Phoenix down by a railroad track. Yes, and I left that gal in pieces down in a lonely Arizona shack. Well, it's a shame, but I am to blame, and I will admit that the shoe fits. Oh, but I know that deep down low, you're loving it. And that's why I say,
every night is just Saturday night.
what is lowbrow art? Okay, lowbrow art is like, it's all power emblems. All of it. It's all icons of power. Okay? Powerful machinery, powerful people, powerful sexual images, animals, skulls, lightning bolts, flames. It's all power imagery.
The term lowbrow, I think, just sucks. And I'll tell you, everybody hates it.
Everybody hates it, you know? It's like, you know, Lever Williams that coined the one term that everybody hates.
Personally, I fucking hate the word lowbrow, and I don't really like to use it.
No one really likes it, but I guess that's what it's being called.
I don't really like the terminology of lowbrow. I mean, a lot of people like it. To me, it's kind of like new wave, you know, just sort of a catch-all that doesn't catch anything.
I don't know. I don't hate the term. I think it's a great term. I think it's pretty descriptive.
I think it's really destructive to the art industry or the art movement in Los Angeles. We've seen a change, you know, where everybody thinks, well, if I don't paint this way, I'm not cool or I'm not going to get in the show. So you see a lot of repetition going on now. It's really getting fucking ridiculous, you know? It really is.
Lowbrow art is actually copyrighted by Robert Williams.
It's not a good term. It's not a great term.
I think it has a lot to do with people making art that you do have an emotional response to, not just an intellectual response.
That's why it's been so difficult to kind of label this movement. Because you can't call everybody lowbrow, and you can't label everybody pop surrealist, and you can't, you know, it's difficult.
I call it pervasive art, and I think I'm the only one who's calling it pervasive art.
I like monobrow better.
Monobrow.
I don't think it's up to us to define it either, really. I think it's one of those terms that people are placing on it. Like they have throughout history, they're trying to put people in a group.
Nobody else has come up with a better name, so that's probably why it is stuck.
The whole movement, if you can call it that, seems to be exploding.
Right now in LA, there's a real renaissance going on. To me, it's an exciting time.
It's feeding off of itself, and you know, all the artists are friends with each other, which is something I really haven't seen that much of.
It comes out of a West Coast thing, an LA thing, really. Going back to Ed Big Daddy Roth, a lot of it's based on these subcultures like surfing or hot rodding. Those are really LA things. You know, they were conceived, born, and bred in Los Angeles.
And then, of course, you had skateboarding and graffiti.
Day of the Dead in Mexico.
Mad Magazine and Zap Comics.
Rock and roll records.
Being movies, surf culture, tattoo, carnival.
But it really is mimicking sort of the geographic landscape of Los Angeles itself. It's without a center. You know, it's really spread out.
That soundstage blankness of LA allows for almost anything to happen here.
It's a parallel art world. There's many parallel art worlds, and that's one of them.
You have these two impulses. One is maybe to sugarcoat things out here. On the other hand, you have this thing where they're very keenly aware of just how fucked up this culture is, and so they're addressing that.
I think the collectors here are buying because they truly love it, and they can't wait to rush the piece home and hang it up on their wall.
You know, the West Coast is also influenced by Eastern culture. We've got Japan nearby.
Some of these other artists who are doing a lot of the same stuff that the West Coast artists are doing, like Takeshi Murakami or Nara. The idea that an artist can also be an illustrator and can also make toys, it's kind of the way that we were doing it here as well.
But, you know, Japanese people doesn't understand to the high and low.
You know, in Japan they have these department stores and they've got museums, like, in the store, because Japan doesn't see any division between art and commerce at all.
All culture has a same level.
I mean, Michelangelo was a commercial artist, you know? That's, the Sistine Chapel was a commission, you know? I mean, it wasn't, he didn't sneak in the middle of the night and do that.
The art market is the last unregulated, handshake, no contracts, totally just open, Wild West business.
Hi. So, just take your time. Oh man.
I used to see him at the flea markets in Southern California. You know, I always used to look to see what did he buy today? What is, you know, what's that guy buying?
If you're a collector, like, you get the fucking fever, bro. And only real collectors know what that is. And it's a disease.
You become this hoarding fucking monster, you know?
He should start building a pyramid so that, you know, when he dies, they'll shove all his shit in the pyramid so that in like 1,000 years, some archaeologist will like dig this thing up and they will concoct this theory that Long Gone John was like the emperor of North America.
I just keep accumulating, you know, and, you know, it's potentially a big problem. Because I feel I'm amassing this great collection of stuff, and then, you know, you just, you know, die. Or at some point it's like, what does this mean? What am I doing? What am I devoting so much time, energy, passion into filling my house with things? You know what I mean? And some people... And interestingly enough, I don't really consider myself to be a materialistic person. Food is necessary. Oxygen is necessary. You know, art is frivolous. It's a beautiful, wonderful, frivolous thing, but it's an extra thing. And a lot of people and a lot of cultures, including Western civilization, do not fucking have and collect art, and they're getting along just fucking fine and dandy. So, is it necessary? No.
I was awakened by the sound of your voice just after midnight when there wasn't any noise. I went to my window, but you weren't there. I'm dreaming that you still care. Dreaming that you still care. That you think about me sometimes out there. But by the light of day, those dreams all fade away. 'Cause you've gone away to stay. of your touch. Just after midnight when I miss it so much, I whispered your name, but you weren't there. I'm dreaming that you still care. Dreaming that you still care. That you think about me sometimes out there. But by the light of day, those dreams all fade away. 'Cause you've gone away to stay.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Willow!